Mm.
Okay, let's be real honest. I'm like, they should just shut up. What are they talking about? What hair care knowledge do they have when you can just wake up and put water in what do you have? You don't have to do anything to your hair. Your hair is so easy. Hi, y'all. My name is Fo. I go by Fo Adunni, F-O-A-D-U-N-N-I here on YouTube. So, yeah.
Awesome. How would you describe your hair in regards to its texture? Porosity, the actual pattern of your hair strand, coarseness, like you mentioned, anything that you feel would identify your hair. How would you describe it?
So for the most part, I have coarse surface texture and coarse strand size. My hair is high density, meaning I have a lot of hairs per square inch on my head. What else? My hair is confusing to a lot of people. My hair is confusing to a lot of people. When a lot of people see it's the elephant in the room. Whenever I begin to discuss hair with other Black people, they're wondering, is this hair silky, soft, smooth, easy to detangle, slippery? I've heard so many different things about my hair. They'll say things like, well, my hair isn't slippery like yours. And I'm like, my hair isn't slippery. Who told you that? Mm-hmm. It's important for me to recognize that even for me, initially on my channel, it was difficult for me to describe my hair because I was so confused about the experience that I was having when I touched my hair, but then what my hair actually looked like. Feels almost like it could put little cuts on my hands. Like I feel the roughness of my hair, but then I look and I see my hair when I film or when I look in the mirror and I see this hair that has a shimmer and a sheen and a shine to it. And I spoke with my stylist recently about how is that possible? How am I feeling this with my hair, but then my hair looks this way? And she said that it's because my hair is very dark. And she said that a lot of Black people, their hair is not as dark as mine. So my hair is very, very, very dark. So once it's organized, when it's in an afro, it might shimmer a little bit, but when it's organized in a wash and go, then it's able to have this level of shine that you're seeing, or sheen that you're seeing here. And so I know that my hair has an ambiguity to it because it's confusing to a lot of people. I think that a lot of people will associate it with some Eurocentric ideals. So I think a lot of people will associate my hair with being silky, soft, smooth, easily defined, and all these other things. But my hair is none of those things. It's just that I've cultivated my hair in such a way. I've cared for my hair in such a way, done certain methods with my hair, where my hair's ended up in a more defined state with defined wash and goes, and it also is able to reflect light better with the health of it. And that's not to say that everybody will go through a similar hair care process as me, and their texture will end up showing up the way that mine does. But my hair is coarse, and I want to make sure to say that I was told that my hair has this coarseness to it by co-founder of Black Girl Curls, Aisha Strickland. And it's unfortunate, but I know it's important for me to name drop so people can know that a stylist that I really respect and whose ideology I follow, Aisha Strickland, she told me that these are my hair characteristics, and my current hairstylist agreed that these are my hair characteristics. So
my first thought when hearing you speak about it is sadness that I'm sure you've been made to feel in situations like you have to explain yourself. Like, like you have to explain how you know your hair just so that people don't second guess it. But I believe it because I remember years and years ago, if I had seen your hair type, I wouldn't have even thought of it as Afro textured. I would have thought of it as like, yeah, that's like curly white people hair. Like they're blessed with curly white people hair. But I've had to learn how diverse and large the Afro hair textured section is, and that it's not just one type of hair care. And yes, while you may have struggles with your hair type, it doesn't mean that you have the only struggles. You don't have the market cornered on struggles or having to learn how to do your hair. And just because someone has a different characteristic, for you to automatically assume that their hair is just naturally easier, that they don't have to go through stuff, and to kind of treat them like an other is not right. So it's unfortunate that, that's still kind of the stigma of just hair in general. I wouldn't even be surprised if people asked you. I think you mentioned in the other video that people said it was because, you know, your African-American side, you must be mixed with so many things. Like it can't just be African descent hair, but if you go to Africa and you go to different countries, your hair texture is seen in a lot of countries. So it is native, you know, to Africa. So those are my first thoughts on it. Was just, I appreciate you, you know, taking the time to explain all of that, because I think we, myself included, a lot of people are just ignorant on a lot of those differences when it comes to, you know, hair type. In regards to my own hair type, I would consider it to be medium density. And I would consider my hair strand to also be medium. I don't think that I have a ton of hair on my head. I think that if I don't position my hair the right way, it'll look like I only have 3 strands. Like everything has to be strategically placed. Otherwise, it just can look very, very sparse, to where sometimes I'm like, am I like, where's the rest of my hair? Like it can just really look funny sometimes to me. Like if you were to look at my hair when it's braided for a twist up versus when it's out, to me, it looks like it shouldn't even be the same head of hair, because it looks so minimized in a twist and it looks so big when it's out that it can be very deceiving, which I think is part of why people oftentimes think that Afro hair is just so strong, or like that Lil Wayne song, you know, tougher than Nigerian hair, because
I hate
such
that
an
line.
annoying line, because our hair may look like it's so opposing, it looks like it's so strong, but at least my strands are very, very fragile and they're not very, very strong, so they shouldn't be treated that way. So I hate those kind of misconceptions, but I would consider me to be on the end of the hair chart in regards to like a curl pattern. I've even gone back and forth of, and I still don't completely know, and maybe I just don't even really care what the exact label of it would be, but I don't know if I would consider my hair curly. Because of how it really is just a very, very, very tight spiral, and how I don't ever actually see a curl pattern. It's more of just fluff. Like I just think of it as like, it's just fluffy. It's not necessarily like a ringlet or something. So I usually don't associate curly with my hair, but I've also heard people who have a similar curl pattern who would say their hair is curly. So I mean, to each their own. I don't think the word really matters all that much. If you want it call it kinks or coils or curls. I kind of look at them all in the same family. We were just talking about hair color. I would say that my hair color definitely does contribute to my overall matte look. I don't think I've ever seen my hair look shiny, which definitely used to bother me growing up, because I thought that hair is supposed to be shiny. I thought that was the sign of healthy hair. So it took me a while to accept the fact that no matter how much oil and grease I put into my hair, it is always just going to be matte. But now I look at that as still beautiful, just another type. Like I think it's actually kind of cool that my hair has no shine and that it's just going to be matte, like a matte lipstick. So if we can have matte lipstick, we can have shiny lipstick. How come we can't have matte hair and shiny hair? It's just 2 different kinds of, you know, of hair types. So that's what I would say overall in regards to what that looks like. Building off of that, what are your thoughts on the traditional hair typing chart in general? Do you use it? Did you ever use it? Do you think that it's helpful, beneficial, or do you think it kind of puts us in a box? I feel like it can be very polarizing. So I'm just curious to hear to hear your thoughts on that one.
Polarizing is the word. I don't use the hair typing system at all. I don't use the hair typing system at all, because if I choose a number and letter on that system, people will will write fantasies in their head about my whole entire hair experience. When people see my hair the way it looks now, they already write fantasies about what my hair experience is. But then if I, on top of that, I choose a number and a letter, oh, it's over with. They're like, okay, so you're right here. So that means that this person after you on the hair typing chart had it harder than you when it came to caring for their hair. They had it way harder than you. So I think about, there's this theorist named Patricia Hill Collins. She wrote in Black Feminist Thought. She talks about how Black women can have this shared ideology, these shared thought processes, because we've had these similar experiences in white supremacy. And so with me having similar experiences as an unambiguously Black woman, to other Black women in the white supremacist context of the United States, I know that I've had similar hair experiences to other Black women or other Black people. But what happens for me when I start to name a hair type, or even when some people just see my hair in a wash and go, what happens to me is people end up thinking that we don't have any shared experiences. We don't have any collective consciousness. People think that I don't share anything in common with them. Or they think I share very little in common with them when it comes to hair. And I feel like the hair typing system exacerbates that for me. And so that's why I don't use the hair typing system. But I want to say, I want to say that there's some nuance there for me too, because I understand why the need for some people to categorize themselves as 4C specifically. I understand why people categorize themselves as 4C, because there are people that are the furthest away from a Eurocentric ideal aesthetically when it comes to their hair. Their hair has these really extremely small curls or waves. Oftentimes, maybe it doesn't reflect light. Sometimes the hair can have a sheen and a shimmer to it. But there are some people that have these experiences with this with these really tiny curls that don't reflect light, or some people that don't have the tiniest curls, but their hair doesn't reflect light. Sometimes they've had these experiences of being abused when it comes to their hair because of the way it looks, how it looks matte, and it deviates so far from a Eurocentric ideal. So maybe they had somebody leaving a relaxer on their hair for too long because they're like, oh, we need to, we need the super perm, it's sort of just different types of abuse that people have experienced because their hair is considered so far away from a Eurocentric ideal. And I understand the need to create community and around those people and uplift those people specifically that have had this really matte hair or have had hair that has really small curls. And so, I understand why people use the label 4C to find each other, to discuss these experiences. I understand why. And so, I don't pass any sort of judgment towards that distinction. But I know for sure when it comes to labeling myself with a number and letter, it's harmful. It's harmful. And I think that even labeling others with a number and letter is harmful. Because people, once again, they work hard to say, how do I not identify with you as another person of African descent? Maybe not even just a Black woman. Maybe this is a person that's mixed race that has African ancestry. People move away from, how do I identify with you? What is our collective consciousness in these experiences with our hair? And they move straight towards, oh, you're more like white people than me. And it's like, what? But what about the strength that we gain from thinking about our collective consciousness, from thinking about our shared experiences and how we can work against oppression, or how we're already working against oppression?
And a lot of that makes sense. And I can understand where you're coming from. I mean, obviously I haven't had your specific hair experiences, but I could definitely understand how, because I've seen it on YouTube, and I've had the same thoughts in my own head when I see someone talking about Afro hair care. If their hair looks more similar to yours than mine, I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because in the past, I didn't understand how those two could be in the same category, or like, what's going on here? Like, what are we talking about? Why is it so different? And I think, unfortunately, I feel like it just comes from a place of pain and insecurity, because like you said, they're looking at your hair and thinking that you're closer to, white people. And I think it's just pointing out the own inadequacies that they may be feeling with their hair at that time. And so when they see that someone doesn't look exactly like their hair, they want to figure out how to make themselves feel better. Because if I say I have Afro textured hair and you have Afro textured hair, and maybe I don't like my result with my hair, I don't like what mine is doing, but I see yours and I think it looks nice and I think it's flourishing. Now I have to figure out why we both who have Afro textured hair, why I'm struggling and you seem to not be, which means that I now have to put the microscope on myself and think about my own hair practices. And that's hard. It's hard to look at yourself and wonder why something that you have that someone else also has, why yours doesn't seem as quote unquote good, which we shouldn't even be thinking of our hair as good or not good to begin with, but I can absolutely understand that concept. So if I can say, oh, it's because she's mixed. Oh, it's because she has, Eurocentric hair. Now I'm off the hook. Now I don't have to go home and cry myself to sleep because I don't even have to compare myself to you because you're in a different category that I could never even approach because you're not actually really, really, really Black because you have a different hair type that's closer to white people. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that is the perspective and direction that we take with it. Because for me, the hair typing chart from the position that I was in, I have not been usually looked at throughout my life as the hair type that other people were saying that they were envious of. So I haven't had that same experience of people saying to me like, oh, are you mixed with something? Or, oh, it's because you're mixed with whatever. It was like, oh, you've got like that African hair. That's the kind of stuff that I used to hear. So for me, the hair typing chart was liberating because I would look at those relaxer boxes and it would have that lady on the box and she would just get a relaxer. And at that time, I didn't know that oftentimes those people are wearing extensions. I'm thinking, I really thought that was their natural hair. You're on a box. What are you doing wearing a weave? I had no idea. So I would look at everyone around me and I'd be like, what's wrong with me? Like, how come my hair doesn't look like what all of these other Black African-American women look like? So when I found out about the hair typing chart, it was liberating because I finally realized that there were people whose hair reacted similarly to mine, where, oh, okay, their hair also never gets shiny. That's not just me. Or, oh, okay, their hair also is very, 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 very prone to tangling. That's not just me. And it felt like I found a safe place or a haven of people that I could connect with. And seeing those kind of individuals with a hair type that was similar to mine have hair that was long and flourishing was such a mind-boggling experience because I didn't even think that existed, because at that time, the only people that I saw who did have longer hair or didn't complain about their hair were people whose textures was different than my own. So when I was doing a lot of my researching, if I didn't have the ability to look up 4C, I don't know if I would have been able to come to a lot of those, insights yet. I don't think I would have discovered it so easily because I wouldn't have even known what to look up yet. It was the fact that I was able to find those women who were usually of African descent or West African, and learn from them. And then once I got past that, I started to branch out into different areas outside of just curl pattern with, porosity and density, and learn like, oh, wow, like, yeah, your actual curl pattern is one thing, but that's not the only factor to your hair type. And there are more similarities that I could have with another person. They may not have my exact curl pattern, but they may have a similar density. And where we share density, we might actually have a more similar experience than a girl who's 4C who has a completely different density, or who has a completely different porosity, or who has a hair growth that is much different than my own. Maybe their hair grows half an inch to an inch a month, whereas mine grows a quarter of an inch to a month typically. I might have, more in common with someone who has that. So I can completely understand both sides of what you're saying of how it can be harmful. But like with everything I'm learning in life, I think it's one of those things where it can be harmful and damaging if we choose to use it that way. It can absolutely be a way to isolate yourself and to other people. And it brings me back to, the concept of the house slaves and the field slaves. It's just another way to categorize ourselves and keep us separate. I wish that it was more so utilized as an area where we both have Afro textured hair, but mine's a little bit like this, yours a little bit like that. That's interesting. That's cool. Let's learn from one another. Let's hear why is that different? How does your hair react when you do that? Oh, cool. Here's how my hair reacts when I do that. And just genuine interest and curiosity and learning about each other, and it being okay to embrace our differences, but still all be under the same umbrella of Afro textured hair, and not feeling like Afro textured hair has to look like only one thing. And if it doesn't, then it's like you're out of the club. That's not that's not what I feel like we should be called to do. So that it's been interesting to see the shift of this on YouTube, because there are a lot of women that I watch that I would consider to be, you know, quote unquote 4C, who might say, I'm done with the hair typing chart. I'm typed for it. I'm not saying anything else. And I'm like, cool, I'll watch that. And then there are other women who are like, yeah, I'm 4C till I die. Let's do it. Let's talk about that. I'm like, that too. I like both of those different approaches, but I understand why both of you feel that way. And one thing that really was eye-opening for me that I don't think I learned until just last year, I didn't realize that even the length of your hair can impact the way that your hair looks and its texture. So I was hearing from women who reached like waist length and tailbone length hair that said they were 4C, and they would talk about how in the beginning of their journey, their hair would only grow up because they didn't have enough length yet to weigh it down. And now that their hair is longer and it's weighing it down, they're now being called up by other people saying, you're not 4C. And they're like, are you kidding me? Have you not seen my journey for the past 10 years? You don't understand that your curl pattern is not the only thing that will indicate how your hair will look like. And you're trying to put me into a box, but let me explain to you that there's more things like your length, like your density and all that stuff. So I think it can be helpful, but I do think I agree that it can be harmful, and it can just be used as a tool to be defensive towards yourself and not deal with maybe practices that you're doing that could be harmful for your own hair health, and just, like I said, othering other people.
Yeah, and there's something else that I think of. I didn't grow up with my hair looking like this. I think that's very important for me to say. I didn't grow. So I've had. Let's be blunt. I've had the my hair is not good hair experience, and I've had the, oh, you have good hair experience as well. No, I even remember an instance where I visited a salon and the stylist was like, she pointed to her daughter who had looser, smoother, silkier hair. And she said, my daughter, she can wash and go. She said, but you have to braid or twist your hair. So that's what the stylist said to me. A lot of people look at my hair and they're like, oh, you put ketchup in your hair, fo. And I'm like, but it takes so much work, and it takes so much of me checking in with myself and being mindful and humbling myself and realizing that this is just, God gave this ambiguity to me where my hair has a look to it, but that's not what my hair actually is. When people associate my hair with that good hair, bad hair complex, and they look at my hair through that good hair lens, the way it looks now, God gave me these characteristics in order for me to realize the importance of emphasizing the diversity of Black hair. And I would also say that God gave me these characteristics in order for me to recognize very clearly the importance of emphasizing privilege. I mean, and that's being honest. There is a privilege that is associated with my hair looking like this. There's a privilege. And so, with my hair looking closer to maybe a white supremacist ideal, with it having sheen and shimmer and having definition and having movement, with my hair having a look that people can associate with a white supremacist ideal, I know that maybe sometimes people will be more willing to listen to my hair care perspective than somebody else that doesn't have hair that has shimmer and sheen, that's following a similar approach, and their hair is matte, naturally matte. Maybe it's a brown color that doesn't reflect light the way that my hair can, or it's the surface texture with the color of their hair that doesn't reflect light. So people might say, I'm gonna listen to Flo because she's got the shiny hair. Let's be real. So, or there's a privilege where people can find my hair more attractive, and or the hair that looks like mine more attractive, and not it shouldn't receive certain types of abuse. I've heard these stories of people that have hair that doesn't have the shimmer and the sheen to it, and so like we said, this thing of thinking that they need a super perm and they need such a aggressive combing and all sorts of like abuse. I understand that with the way that my hair looks now, that I might not necessarily, I'm less likely to experience that. So there's a privilege there that I believe that that's part of. So not only recognizing the diversity of hair, but the privilege that I have in this space with the way that my hair looks, and the importance of, okay, so what do I do with this privilege? So now I understand that the admiration the admiration that people give me for my hair, and it's specific, when they name specific qualities, shine, definition, the admiration that I'm getting for this hair, I should be pumping out that people that don't have shine, people that don't have definition, they should be getting the same admiration. So that privilege is teaching me to think about how to make things more equitable in terms of how people that don't have hair that can look similar to mine, how they should be treated, and actually just how Black people should be treated with different hair textures across the board. It's teaching me, this ambiguity of my hair is teaching me a privileged experience, and causing me to think, okay, so this is how this person should be. Okay, yeah, this is how they should be treated. So there's more that I can say about the privilege, but I want to make sure I don't want to talk too much.
No, it's impossible for you to talk too much here, but that's all really, really interesting. Very, very interesting and very, very eye-opening, because for most of my life, I have thought 4C is the most difficult hair type. We have the most problems. We have the least amount of representation. And sometimes when I would hear people who have a different hair texture complain or talk about their hair, I'd be like, really? Like, really? Because I only have my perspective. So it was just, it can be difficult to understand that just because you have your own experiences and your own difficulties does not mean that somebody else does not have their own. So you sharing all that information is just so interesting, and it's so eye-opening, because what you're talking about with the being ambiguous and having that privilege, that in itself brings its own difficulty. Because like I said, I've never experienced someone looking at me like that, or someone thinking like, oh, I'm privileged because of my hair. I've only been on the like, I feel like I'm being kicked for my hair, like I feel like I'm being put down. But you've been in a different position where you have to sometimes probably feel your own kind, your own people look at you like, we don't accept your hair because it doesn't look like ours. Like, that's a different experience that I've never had. And I think in general, when people look at themselves as in any area of your life, because I think that, we all, Black people included, like you mentioned, you may have certain privileges with your hair type. We all have our own privileges that we may not be aware of. But when you're not in that position and you might be on the opposite of what you think that privilege is, you just automatically think of the alternative as they don't deal with anything, like they don't go through anything. And it makes you almost dehumanize them, or not be as empathetic to what their potential struggle is, or like you said before, less willing to connect with them. So it's just fascinating to hear all of that. And I'm just really impressed with your self-awareness to even be able to say that you could recognize how your hair type could bring you some privileges in some areas, but at the same time, to some people, it still might look too Black. Like, it still might not be white enough and still might not be acceptable. And I think that is something that people forget as well. Your hair type in the Black community may look a certain way. Maybe some people would call it good hair, but when you go out on the street and you're not in the Black community, they may not see a difference between you and I. Like, we might be the same to that person who's looking at us. And I think we forget that. And it's unfortunate, because we really should be gathering together and remembering that fact.
You know what's so crazy?
Yeah.
I used to look at people with hair, I guess you would say that they would say this is the type 3 hair, or they would have type 3 curls, and I would be like, oh, I can't relate to them at all. Everything is so easy. Okay, let's be real honest. I'm like, they should just shut up. What are they talking about? What hair care knowledge do they have when you can just wake up and put water in your, you don't have to do anything to your hair. Your hair is so easy. Yeah. I used to think that way. And then once my hair started to look like how it looks now, and then people started saying that stuff to me, I was like, oh, my feelings are so hurt. I was like, oh my God, all this work and struggle that I went through, all the mountains I had to move for my hair to get to this health and for my hair to look like this. And then that's when I started to sit down and I started to actually watch the lighter skinned women, or even just the women with looser hair, smoother hair. I would watch them and I would be like, I can identify with them when it comes to this. I can identify with them when it comes to that. And then I would actually see them, I would see people that would actually be implementing steps, like steps to care for their hair. And like they would putting in hard work to care for their hair and get that end result. And, you know, and I also started to listen to the variety of stories. So my curl artist, she's a light-skinned woman with very fine, silky hair. And she explained to me that because her hair is so soft, it cannot go past like day 2 or 3 with definition. It'll just be a soft, pillowy peach fuzz because her hair is so soft. So it's hard for it to hold those curls. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So, and I also know somebody else, her hair is so silky and fragile and fine. I know somebody else, so she likes to use products with a good bit of protein. So I started to listen to the variety in these experiences. And I also started to even just oh, it makes me want to cry. I feel so much love and care with how I can identify with other Black people, or even other Black people of African descent that might be mixed race more. I can identify. So it's like I have this more holistic perspective where I can recognize my privilege. I can recognize their privilege. Like I can recognize how they can do a simple video and now they've got 1 million views. And the woman over here with the hair that looks kinkier and is more matte, she's got like 500 views for doing the same video. I can recognize that privilege, but then I can also listen and hear where we connect as people of African descent with our experience. Like I think of Tia and Tamara Mowry and how I grew up watching them, you know, and like I said, I had my afro, my hair was frizzy, which is not a bad thing, but I never had defined curls growing up. But I would sit down and I would watch Tia and Tamara Mowry and see, I never had long hair either. I would see them with their draping loose curls on Sister Sister. And I would know that I would think to myself, I don't have the good hair. And so, you know, I would be like, not only am I not light skinned, but I don't have the good hair. But now as an adult, I hear them talk about their hair experiences and how they have to change their hair for casting calls so it wouldn't be read as too ethnic. So they have to straighten their hair for casting calls, or them being on set and nobody knowing how to do their textured hair. And, you know, just now I can hear where I identify with them as another person of African descent. And it's just so rich. So I think that a lot more people would be willing to have more honest conversations about privilege and those things that everybody should be given when it comes to the appreciation of their hair and the treatment they receive with their hair. I think that more people would be honest about privilege if we were more willing to connect and be honest about where we identify as well. I saw this is the messiest website on earth. I don't recommend anybody go on it. I was on it by mistake, but Mariah Carey in her autobiography talks about how her hair was such a struggle as a mixed race woman and how like her Black family members didn't know how to do her hair and it looked a hot, crunchy, full mess. Like, you know, it looked terrible, you know? And so she talked about that. And so there was this thread on Lipstick Alley where this person was just adamant about how her Black family members should have known how to do her hair. They were insinuating that because Mariah Carey is mixed race, that her hair is easy. They were like, they were insinuating this hair is easy. Just slick it back, just slick it down, just it's easy, it's easy, it's easy. And it's like, no, let me say this, where people get confused is someone's hair can be easier to fulfill a Eurocentric beauty standard than yours, but it doesn't mean that when they actually go to manually care for their hair, it's easier to care for. There's a difference between those two things. Like I know people that have smaller curls than mine, hair that would be considered like less beautiful in a Eurocentric ideal, within the context of a Eurocentric ideal. But I know that I likely might have more issues with tangling than them because I have what's called telephone cord curls on the sides of my head, on the back of my head. I have telephone cord curls that bounce up. The shrinkage is a lot. A lot of people don't think I have shrinkage, but the shrinkage is a lot. And because of that, the hair can tangle and lock up really easily and have to be really mindful and careful. And that's another reason why I cleanse my hair so often, so I can detangle it often to make sure it doesn't tangle up. But I know people with smaller curls than mine would receive more harsh treatment for how their hair looks, but that doesn't mean that their hair is harder to care for than mine.
Do you think that women should be watching videos and following the advice, just specifically on YouTube, since that's the platform that we're on, of women who look like they have their same hair type primarily or only? Or do you think that women should be watching all Afro hair type textured? How do you view that?
I think that something that makes things that puts a little bit of a twist on my perspective on that is I don't necessarily operate from the look of the hair. I operate from, I want to know what's the foundation of your knowledge, what undergirds your hair care knowledge. So that's where I'm starting from. Like, somebody I love to watch is What the Kink. And so What the Kink, not only does she have a science background, having been a science teacher, but she also has, she shared that she learned from similar hair care knowledge as me. And also from books like The Science of Black Hair and things like that. So for me, I'm more so when I'm listening to people of African descent explaining hair care, I'm listening for your citations. I'm listening for what undergirds your hair care explanation, because there's a certain science of hair where there's a certain science of hair, and then there's this layered of, we also have texture hair that kind of come together and they meld together in such a way. And so I'm listening for that. But if I went for the look of somebody's hair, that wouldn't do anything for me personally. But I will say this, I do acknowledge that sometimes people need to go for the look of people's hair in order to feel encouraged, to feel represented, not to be represented, not feel. They are represented. They need to go for the look that they feel comfort. And they say that if I do my hair in a similar way, it's going to look similar. So I think that makes perfect sense for people to look for people that have hair that looks similar to theirs for that. But me personally, I don't feel like anybody has hair. I really don't hear people talk about having hair similar to mine. So I just go for their knowledge, because if otherwise I would go and I would look at people and they would often have silky hair. And guess what? I can't do the same type of routines. Well, I can do some similar things in terms of, like, I can shampoo, I can condition, I can do those type of similar things. But if this is a person with silkier hair, then they might be able to apply mousse and a stronghold mousse like Mousse Def and get a wash and go for 3 days. And I can't do that. My hair is coarse. I use Mousse Def, using it properly, that mousse, and I get a wash and go for a day. I've seen people wavy, swavy hair, and their hair not like that. And even African Hair Guide had a mixed race child, the cosmetologist, he had a mixed race child come into the salon, and her hair was so matted, severely matted and tangled. And it's like people, for the life of them, couldn't understand how her hair could be matted and tangled. Just because someone's hair can fulfill a Eurocentric beauty standard easier, that does not mean that their hair, the actual care of the hair, is easier than your hair that falls more in line with this sort of essentialized understanding of what Black hair is. So there's that, but.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that when we talk about what is, because I've definitely used to think that if your hair is looser, then your hair is automatically easier to care for. But I'm now understanding, because there are people that I've now met who do have a looser hair texture, who tell me that they have not been able to grow their hair at all, where they're asking me questions. I'm like, I thought that it was supposed to be easy for that. Okay, interesting. But I'm realizing that when we say easy, what does easy hair actually mean when we break that down? Because I think when people say that, they'll say things like, well, you can go into a shower and just wash your hair like this, and then get out of the shower and go and air dry your hair. Does that mean that your hair is easy to care for? Or does that mean that you can wash your hair in that particular way. Sure, you could choose to think that that is easy, but that person who's washing their hair that way probably also has to wash their hair more frequently because the hair strands are gliding down, or the oil is gliding down their hair strands a lot more. They're probably a lot more prone to having oily hair where it's visible, where it's like, oh, I have to go wash my hair because now it's not looking the way I want it to look. Whereas I can go a long time without washing my hair strands. Sure, my actual practice of washing my hair is going to likely be longer, and I'm going to have to put more care and thought into it. I'm not going to be able to just go in and do that, but I can extend that for weeks, if not months, if I really want to. So who's to say what is easier? Or just the fact that I have the ability to braid my hair or to twist my hair, not put a rubber band at the end, it'll stay that way. My friends who have straight silky hair, they can't twist their hair without actually banding it at the bottom. So who's to say what is easier? It's just different. But again, like what you're saying, because a lot of what we consider that we treat as good or bad or easy as hard is really black or white, black or white. We tend to think that whatever white people can do, that's easy and that's good. And we forget all of the advantages that we do have with black hair, that we don't even think of it as a concept. Something even as simple as volume. We never talk about freaking volume. When was the last time as a Black person did you go to the store and you said, you know what I need today? I need a volumizing shampoo. Not one time, not one time in my life, not one time in my life have I said, I need to, what is it that it's called? I don't even remember the terminology of what they used to do where they would, back in the 80s, when teasing, where you would have to tease your hair and manipulate it and like intentionally make a knot and then cover it up with other hair to make the illusion of volume. When do Afro textured people have to do that with volume? But we don't even think about that. But when you talk to a lot of non-Black people who have fine silky hair, volume and trying to get their hair not to go limp after putting curls in it, that's a very common issue that we take for granted because we're so accustomed to looking at ourselves as always having the short end of the stick, always being the victim, always being given what was bad, as opposed to looking at our hair as a gift and just the amazing abilities of what we have, how gravity defying our hair can be. Like we don't even think about that. So I find it fascinating. I wish people would challenge themselves on what is actually easy, what is hard, what is good, what is bad for hair, and where do those ideas that I currently hold come from? And do I actually think that, and how can I change that, and how can I work with what I have? But also going back to the question of, should you watch people who have your similar hair type? And it's interesting because you were saying that you can't just go off of look because that might not actually give you the information that you're looking for. So you go more so based off of knowledge. I feel like that's a privilege that I have that I didn't even think about, because when I'm looking for people with my hair type, I just type in 4C. I just type in 4C. I look at their hair when it's wet. I look at when it's dry. And I feel like just based off of those basic qualifications, I can usually feel safe understanding or listening to what they're going to be talking about with hair in regards to thinking that we're fairly similar. Whereas with yours, because it's more ambiguous, it's probably not going to be as easy for you to find someone that you feel can emulate what you're looking for. And even more importantly, what it is that you're looking to do with your hair, right? Because someone might have a very similar hair makeup as you, but what if they don't want to do wash and goes? What if that person only wants to wear an afro every day? I bet that person who's wearing an afro every day is going to have a different hair practice as someone who is looking to do more wash and goes, because you're after a different result. Similar to even my hair type, I'm someone who's looking more so for length. So my hair practices are going to be different than someone who has 4C hair but has dreadlocks, or has 4C hair but likes to keep their hair in a short fade. Like, it's going to be different. So it's not the only factor, but that's just something that's interesting that came to my mind. One thing though that I do feel strongly about when it comes to hair typing on YouTube, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think people can go overboard with almost acting like they have to police people who don't have what they consider to be real Afro textured hair or real type 4 and they want to other it. I do, speaking to what you were saying about, you know, you can do a twist out and that person can have silky hair, they'll have 1 million views, and you can have this person do the same twist out and they'll have 0. It does sometimes feel to me like I've heard people say they have 4C hair and they'll say things like, I have 4C hair. My hair is so difficult to manage. And I know that I have 4C hair because look at my hair. Look at how like bad it is. They'll talk so poorly about their hair and they'll say that they'll know it's like that because it's 4C. And then you look at their hair type and it doesn't look like your hair. So if you're someone who does fall closer to that 4C hair type and you're generally trying to learn how to do your hair and you type that into the internet and you come up with that person who doesn't have a similar hair type to you, but they're saying that they do, that's when I start to feel like this is why the hair typing system can be important and why it can be harmful if it's not used quote unquote correctly. But I think it can be overcorrected because it's not, I don't think it's fair, nor do I think it's helpful for someone who might be in the 3A category to say they have 4C hair, because then when you go and do a twist out, but I know it sounds crazy, but it happens. But then when you go do a twist out, or I see how you do your wash day, or I see the products that you use, and I'm trying to learn, I'm now looking back at my hair thinking like, it really is me. There really is something wrong with me because we have the same hair type, but my hair is not doing what that person's doing. And I remember when I first started my journey, that those were the kind of thoughts that I would have, that I would compare myself to people who were labeling their hair type as what I was saying was mine, and they were having a completely different result. And it can make you feel like, why, how come we have the same hair type, but when they do that, it looks like that, or when they do that, it looks like that. But that's where the whole density, porosity, is their hair wet, is it dry? Wet and dry is another thing that has completely changed my mind. And I understand what you're saying about how you can't just go off of look, because now when I see someone and they have an afro, that does not mean we have the same hair type. It means that their hair can be an afro when it's dry, but when it's wet, it might look completely different. Like you were saying, your hair can be an afro. And I'm sure if I saw you on the street and I saw your hair in an afro, I wouldn't know that when your hair is wet and it's in a wash and go, that it can look like how it looks like right now. But we don't branch into all those different categories of hair, and then we end up being trapped. And then when someone says something and it doesn't match up to our own experience, we think that they're intentionally trying to harm us or they're lying to us. And I do think that some people do that because they want more views. Yeah. And that makes me infuriated, but what can you do? I mean, people are people. I don't think that everyone does that. I do believe that genuinely some people just didn't know that. They didn't know that that wasn't their hair. And they were told from the people in their community, their experiences were, oh, my hair is so hard. Oh, why is your hair so hard to deal with? Oh, you must have that 4C hair. And so then they internalize and they think, well, I must have 4C hair. Then like, how would they know? But when you are already going through your own struggles and you're just kind of ready to lash out on people and be defensive, you look at that girl like you're intentionally trying to scam me. You're intentionally lying. Like, I'm going to call you out on YouTube. I'm going to leave all these comments underneath your page. I felt those same feelings, but now that I'm older, I'm more mature. I understand like not everyone has negative intentions. That girl might honestly think that she has 4C type hair. She doesn't know yet. And whatever, it's a mistake. We're all making this chart up, you know? And anyone who says they have 4C hair, that's not the only strand of hair on your head. I'm sure I've got some 4B, maybe I even have some 4A somewhere that I don't even know. So if in 5 years I find out that I have one patch of 4A, was I lying intentionally? No, I just didn't know. And we're trying to work off of a system that was made by some dude that I don't even know with what intentions, I don't even know. But I think that with everything, there can be an overcorrection and there can also be like an undercorrection. I guess I try to stay away from extremes and feel like the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. So for me, I've appreciated the charting system, and I appreciate being able to find people that have had my hair type because it felt like I was living in a world where I couldn't find that at all. But at the same time, I think that we need to branch out of that a little bit and use that as just like one thing, but there's all this other information that we should be using collectively as like a total chart, which is why I like Green Beauty so much. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Green Beauty.
Yeah.
I love her hair typing system because she really does account for all of those different factors. And she was one of the people who I listened to who was saying like, it's not just your hair pattern. Like you have to start taking into account all of these other factors to really start to learn your hair. And she was saying that's why she didn't like the hair typing chart. And that was such an awakening moment for me because I view her as someone just who's very knowledgeable, who I do think has a similar hair type. So I was like, well, if she's saying that, I mean, there must be something to it. And I started to look more into that and realize like, wow, there's so much more to this entire experience. So yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. I think it's one of those things where people just are maybe not yet mature enough or at that point in their journey, because everything that I'm critiquing or criticizing, I have felt myself at one point where I was thinking like, who is this person trying to claim that she's 4C? She's not 4C. Let me let her know right now that you were not 4C. And it's just ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
It makes no sense, but I understand where it was coming from and just a place of insecurity and anger and disappointment and what my own hair was doing at that time and just not understanding the full picture.
Yeah, I guess with my hair, I've always known since I've heard about hair typing, I've always known that I didn't have what's considered 4C hair, and I think it's because of I think it's always been because of the sheen of my hair. So my hair didn't necessarily have as much shine as it has now when it's defined, but it always had some sheen to it. It always had a darkness to it. It always had a thickness to it, even when it was just in the afro that people appreciated. I still at the same time it had those experiences of, you know, a lady at church, older lady saying I shouldn't go natural, that looks bad, or
wow,
you know, or I also had this really weird this really interesting experience of a hair salon that I used to go to. They were so supportive, so uplifting, but when I first went natural in 2009, they used to put like a texturizer on my hair. And the reason why she did that, she said it was to make it more ladylike, to make my hair more ladylike.
Wow.
So, but what was weird is I internalized that as I know I don't have the good hair, but it didn't make me feel bad about myself. It just made me feel like that's what you're supposed to do to my hair to make it look good. Because at the same time, these women in this salon, it was a traditional salon. These women were like, how's school going? How's track going? You're beautiful. Keep up your grades. You know, I was in the presence of Black women feeling loved, and as a teenager, and probably hearing some conversations I shouldn't have been hearing about their relationships. And I was having the time of my life in that beauty salon. So it's kind of like, you know, yes, I've had these experiences where there was this distinction made where it's like, you don't have the good hair. But then I've also had these experiences where people were like, well, you don't have the bad hair. But then I've also had experiences where it's kind of like, nobody's ever flat out said to me, your hair is nappy, your hair is this, your hair is that. I would say the most jarring experience was when that stylist was like, you have to braid or twist your hair. You can't wash and go. I bet that stylist would faint on my hair now. She'd be like, I'm confused.
Oh my goodness.
Sense. But I think that something that we've been talking about is this idea of decolonizing what we understand Black hair to be. So there's this unfortunate understanding of the hair that's matte the hair that's matte and or has the tiniest curls. That's the Blackest hair. That's the true African hair. That's the real African hair. That's the undiluted, no white, no other, no Indian, no Asian, no nothing. That's the true Black hair. And that's unfortunate because even among Nigerian Americans that I've seen that are 100% Nigerian, even among them, I see hair that is all these different textures: silky, smooth, straight, thick, thin. You know, I remember working with someone's hair, and I know that some people would perceive it as hard because it was matte looking and the curls are really tiny. But when I touched it, it was the softest hair I'd ever felt in my life. And so I think about that experience. Hold on one second. That experience makes me think of all the Black people whose heads are beat up on just because it doesn't look like white people's hair. when their hair is actually really soft and fine and delicate, and all these words that are associated with positive things. And so I just, I think that we really got to work to stop. We got to, and so that essentialization of what Black hair is, it comes from colonization. It comes from enslavement, because there was a need to distinguish. This is the white people. There was a need to create our current understanding of race in order to justify slavery. So one of the tools of racialization was hair. So let's pick out the hair that's the most distinctively different from white people, white supremacist white people. They said, let's pick out the hair that's most distinctively different from white people and say that this is what Black hair is. Yeah. And even among Black people, when there would be variety, instead of an acknowledgement of variety, they would say, okay, is it useful for me to say that how your hair is similar to mine? Is it useful to me at the moment to welcome you into certain privileges of whiteness? Or is it more useful for me to say you're not white like me at the moment? And so how I think about that translating into current context, translating into current context is, I think about that person that might be mixed race. And not all mixed race people have silky hair or smooth hair or large curls, but they're mixed race with loose hair and large curls. So I think about them, and I think about them in a context that's largely white or among white family members. And I think about them possibly enduring racism where they're told, your hair looks like pubic hair, your hair is nappy, your hair is awful, because those white people in that current context find it advantageous to point out what they feel are these Black characteristics about this mixed race person. But what's interesting is intraracially, a Black person can look at that mixed race person and say, privilege, privilege, privilege. So easy. Your hair is so easy. Not only is your hair easy to care for, even though I don't know if it actually is, your hair is you are experiencing the ultimate level of your privilege in this white supremacist context, and they may not be. Yeah. There's like this overarching white supremacist ordeal where there is in fact hair that's considered the furthest away from a white supremacist standard of beauty. And we say that that's 4C hair. We understand it to be 4C hair. But despite that, depending on a person's individual context, they might be experiencing where white people have decided that their hair is too much like Black people for them. That they're too much like a Black person. You are too much like a Black person for me in this moment. I need to exert my white supremacy. So, and that's not denying the privilege that can still exist. And the privilege that can happen that person that has hair that's considered 4C has absolutely no access to at any moment. So absolutely, we're far more diverse than we realize. And I think we've barely scratched the surface. And again, like I was saying earlier, we just 40 to 50 years ago, we weren't doing this. Natural hair was not being embraced in this country. So we've come a long way, but we're still very much at the beginning. And we're just now, to me, in the place where we're building the infrastructure for what this world looks like that you're talking about, where you will be able to easily always be able to access, someone who can help you get the type of result with your hair that you will be looking for. And I think that's awesome. And I think conversations like this help to propel that. And I hope, people realize that there's so much information out there and so many different avenues and pathways to really, like you said, I like that phrase of find your aesthetic, find what natural hair looks like for you. Like, just what a cool thought that we're all connected, with this Afro textured hair, but now you get to have the fun of playing with that and figuring out what that looks like for you. And that doesn't even have to be permanent. Maybe, in 10 years, you decide you're only going to wear afros for the rest of your day, for the rest of your life. You never know, you can always change your mind, but it's just fun to be able to figure out, like you're saying, that it's not just one rule. The natural hair community is more than just one look. And we're really just beginning to learn and flesh that out more. Yeah. And let me say this, because I know we're probably getting ready to wrap up. It's 8:00 where you're at. Yep. No worries. Where is she at? I'm so happy that we've been able to work together on both of these collaborations, because I feel like with the hard conversations that we're having, we're demonstrating. I see these videos that keep popping up recently about the natural hair community is dead, the rise and fall of the natural hair community, natural hair is dead, and all these different things that I'm hearing. And it's like, I heard one influencer, and I'll look her video up and I'll make sure to leave it in the comments, her name, but she was talking about, it's not that it's dead, it's that we're evolving. And I've heard other people besides her say that we're evolving. And a part of that evolution is these hard conversations that we're having, where we can talk about our different hair perspectives, where we can get uncomfortable and we could talk about privilege, and we could talk about disadvantage, and we could talk about just ways that we can unify better, and also address these very real issues of, it goes beyond just love your hair, love your hair, love your hair. I'm so grateful to previous influencers and some hairstylists. We know it was largely, what influencers were sharing online, where they were infusing people with a love for their hair. Love your hair, love your hair. I'm so grateful for that. And also a part of that now that continues the love of that hair is, okay, so how do we care for this hair? What are the different ways that we care for our hair? We can love it all day long, but then a lot of people are running back to relaxers. They're saying they hate their hair. The natural hair community is dead because they haven't established those patterns that we talked about, and learn from those patterns. So we need to figure out how to make that information more accessible, more easy, more bite-sized, and more streamlined, so we can continue with this natural hair community, because the natural hair community is not dead. We just proved it today.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And the natural hair community is also not, I really like this video because we're not just talking about how to do a twist out, it's so much deeper than that. Yeah. And just how you think about your hair and the mindset behind it, to me, honestly, is even, I don't know if I should say it's even more important, but I think it's fundamental that you are constantly having these conversations with yourself and checking yourself and finding out, how do I view my hair in this world? Because it will absolutely influence then what expectations you have of your hair, whether or not you view your hair as being wonderful, or if you're having a bad day, and then how you treat your hair. But I think sometimes this part of the conversation gets overlooked, and people just want to go, yeah, that's all good, but like, how do you do stuff? How do you do stuff? And I'm like, slow down. Let's do introduction to Black hair mindset first, So I really appreciate this conversation. I agree with everything that you said. And I absolutely do not think that the natural hair community is dead. I think it's evolving to something, like you said, that is different than what people initially anticipated. And I think that's good. And I think it will continue to evolve to something that we probably won't even recognize in a few years. And I think that's good as well.
Yeah, we just got to hold strong. We can, we can do this.
Absolutely. So yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to speak with me, for inviting me, for reaching out to me. I really appreciate that. And for, spending however long we've been talking on these things in spite of your allergies. You are the real MVP, as they would say. So thank you for that.
Yes, no problem. I've enjoyed this so much. I felt the love, and this was also a very spiritual experience, because it provided the space for me to comfortably talk about all these different dynamics without judgment. So I thoroughly enjoyed having this experience with you. So I'm so happy that you agreed to this. So
yeah, let me know anytime. I'm available.
Okay.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I highly suggest, again, that you check out Fo's channel. If you want to plug your channel one more time in case they forgot.
Yeah, so you can check me out at Fo, F-O, Adunni, A-D-U-N-N-I, here on YouTube, and on Instagram is Fo, F-O _ A-D-U-N-N-I, so A-D-U-N-N-I _.
Awesome. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys whenever I see you next about some more hair content. All right. Thank you, Fo.